We appreciate everyone being here. We're picking it up for a bit of a walk through the library to start off with, because I just want you to get a sense of what we're working with in materials. Some of these I'll reference as we get into the day, and everything has books, okay? It's like not just a few, pardon the handguns, but that's my one for the bush and that's the one for the city. But I have a Native American section that then goes into an Alaskan section kind of here, and then I get into some of my family's stuff here, and then construction related books for the work I've done there. And then this is mainly my work from about here over in all the different languages that it's been translated in, and then this is more family history again here. And then this gets into, my dad was mainly a history teacher, history and economics, and so what we end up with, the best histories are here, some of the best books from my perspective. And then when we get back into this area, we're into, this is just Tesla, for those that know Tesla's work, and that's everything in English and German, on all of his patents, all of his papers, and a lot of material about him. And that gets, we're going to talk a little bit about that as we get into the day. We start to get into Wilhelm Reich, some more esoteric stuff on weather and minerals, get into some of my interest. And then here is just China. Okay, this is 3,000 years of China, from philosophy, from history, from medicine, from herbs. It's really a pretty thorough look, and from military technologies in the modern era. But the root of China is here in terms of the base philosophy and ideas, from the I Ching to the poetry. So things that are important, the art of war as applied all the way across, and then healing, and energy medicine, actually a big part of this and a very important part of this particular area. Then I get into the ideas and opinions of people like Einstein, Snowden, the culture map for communications and intercommunications with cultures, and even the 5 love languages for children, which actually is a really good one if you have children. But then I get into things like Buckminster Fuller and critical path. Buckminster was one of these odd critical thinkers that did incredible work if you take a look at his history. So it's more about thinkers, and then I drop more back into earth sciences, which has always been a big part, and mineral processing, which is again a big part of things that I'm familiar with and have been involved with. So then we go from there to things dealing with interpersonal stuff. So you got Chemistry's a Success, 12 Rules. You know, this is a highly controversial one for those who followed Jordan Peterson's work. I really like his work. I think he brings up some good stuff, and he's worked a lot in the areas I have, you know, working in the tribal world, working in areas where there's a lot of poverty and there's a lot of misery, and there's a lot of joy too. Depth, you know, in some of these guys that doesn't translate well into the modern culture because it doesn't fit the new narratives. But depth comes from suffering, and people who've lived through things know exactly what I'm talking about. That's where we learn, that's where we grow. When you look at the next section, this is like the unreality industry. This is a big part of what I've been talking about. Cambridge Analytica, we'll be talking about them later. Zbigniew Brzezinski's work, who was National Security Advisor to Jimmy Carter when he was president. He was one of the formative people in the Trilateral Commission and the work of the big globalists, the big insiders, along with Henry Kissinger. And they were, you know, in fact, it was Kissinger's jet that I flew back on to Alaska with my family, and the congressional delegation for the memorial services held for my family. In fact, the memorial address is actually in one of these cabinets. It's right here. This is it. These black volumes are the address that was delivered in Congress, as well as the congressional minutes and the things that were done in Alaska. And it was Henry Kissinger's plane that we used for bringing everyone up. And we had a lot of people, a lot of congressmen, people on board, senators on board. And we stopped in Minnesota and picked up my grandparents and bunch of my family members, and we all came to Alaska and did that. And I was 14 at the time. Going back into this library, now we get into physics and quantum physics. We're getting into the areas of my friend's Elizabeth Rauscher's work, and she has 3 volumes here. One of the most brilliant woman physicist of her age, and she passed just a few years ago. In fact, I'll tell her story a bit when we get into it. And then Alexander K. Verenen's work, one of the people I've worked with on mind effects, and he was the former head of the USSR Academy of Sciences Biophysics Division for 10 years before USSR went away. Visiting professor around the world, now deceased as I understand it, but brilliant. And his area of expertise was the mathematics, the physics behind psychic phenomena, the things that are the mysteries of the mind, so to speak. Then we get into kind of a mixed bag of, this is just on the mathematics of phi. It's a weird name, the English Kabbalah. The golden ratio is here. That's the more scientific version, but that's the history of it as it applies to arts, sciences, geometry. Fourth phase of water, there's interesting Pollock's work. But again, science, we start to get more science. Now we start to get more religion and esoteric things about belief systems, religion. A lot goes on in that section, and then we get into something a little bit more interesting for a lot of folks. This gets to both esoteric and scientific. What I got here is agriculture, herbs, everything that you can imagine on herbal substances, on what you can do to live anywhere in the world in the middle of nowhere with nothing. Ways to survive, ways to live, but ways to understand agriculture, not just from a kind of chemical sort of based way, but back from a very deep way. But in all of this material, there's an esoteric side and the scientific side. This is predominantly, this whole area is about the brain. I mean, most of what I got here is about the brain, and it's everything from Ostrander and Schroeder's work, which I talked a little bit about, but they did a lot. They did a book called Super Learning. They did a book called Super Memory over here. The books that really impressed me, one that really impressed me wasn't theirs, it was this one, Mega Brain, and this was done in the 80s by Michael Hutchison, and it was an exploration of machines to improve our human capacity. And we're going to talk about some of that as we go through the day today. But the brain and the mind and what consciousness is, it was a big part of all of it. So it's everything from neurology to the physician's desk reference, what doctors use to decide what they're going to do. And that one's a dated one, but it gives you the general idea. Now, and then in the bottom is even more esoteric stuff. This is really mixed esoteric material throughout this. And this was one of those books, Ostrander and Schroeder again. I read it as a teenager, and they later updated this. I think it was in the 90s after everything opened back up. But we're going to talk about that kind of stuff. We're going to talk about the idea that behind our very nature are aspects of our awareness that we're not even dialed really into in the manner in which we could. And this gets, to me, okay, now this gets really exciting, because the mind effects thing is what most people know my work from. And that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about. Because when human beings are fully activated, when we realize what we are, and then we begin to act like what we are, then the world changes.